What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Crew 2, and well, I wanted to make another video about the Super Sport 300 Plus because I have a really weird feeling this car is going to mess things up a little bit in the hypercar class, probably for the good and bad. So, as we all know, the base speed of this thing is 305 miles an hour compared to the other Bugatti here that's maxed out, which I'm not going to pronounce. 279 miles an hour for basically every other hypercar in the game. Now we're going to have one that does a base of 305, so I'm really wondering, is the Super Sport 300 really going to mess up this class in a really negative way? Basically going over like summits and all that and that good stuff, because I really do feel like this car is going to be something to mess with, but also, can this car have a negative effect on the hypercar class overall, which, to be honest, I have a feeling this vehicle is going to mess up the hypercar class, and the main reason why I say that is the fact of, well, why drive any other hypercar when we have something like this? Now, I know a lot of players are wondering the acceleration on this car might not be as good, and funnily enough, if you guys might have been wondering, someone did mention the fact that you could lower the gearbox just like that and basically make the car a little bit quicker, and that's kind of funny to me because, well, why drive one of the other Bugattis and pretty much any of the other hypercars when something like this vehicle is this good? It basically handles really well, it's also insanely fast, and well, if we're doing like the Detroit Hyper Race, for example, why use any other vehicle besides the Super Sport? And if you have all your friends running this vehicle, you can most likely get the races done a lot faster as well, which will also make you more money in the long run. So I really do wonder how this is going to affect that overall because, you know, the shorter races like that, like for example, a street race being in a summit, I would say if you did lower the gearbox on this car, which I will be testing that out on some of those when, you know, we can actually do the street races with the hypercars, I want to see how the Super Sport will do on one of these smaller races like that, because if this car can still own something like that, I would say there's going to be no reason to drive any other hypercar in the game, which I do think is going to be a problem because a lot of players do like mixing it up. And well, if you guys finally bought that Devo or like you finally bought the Corvette or something, you want to try a different vehicle out, you will most likely be at a disadvantage when using any other vehicle versus Super Sport because of the crazy speed this car has and how fast it can get to it. I have noticed some of the hypercars actually struggle getting to like 260 and 270, which is funny. Looking at you, Pagani Huayra, my goodness, I don't know what is wrong with that vehicle, but some of the cars just really do struggle getting to higher speed. So if you have a car like that and you're trying to compete in a summit and you have a bunch of people running the Super Sport, I do think that's going to be a big disadvantage for that, and it'll make everybody end up buying the Super Sport, which I don't want to say it, but I think in return Ubisoft could end up nerfing this car in some way. Now, if you might have been wondering what are some of the ways I think the Super Sport could be nerfed and or changed to balance it out, well, to be honest, they could lower the top speed of the Super Sport to like 320, which the biggest thing about this is the fact that this car can still get to 320 with no issues at all because of how it's geared. Obviously, the Bugatti is a 7-speed, so this thing can probably get to the 7th gear and then hit like 320 easily, because it does do over 300 miles an hour. With the 6th gear, you know, maxing out at 286, it's going to be kind of hard to fix that. Even though the other Bugattis can also do 315 miles an hour, those cars do struggle a bit to get there. I did notice that, even depending on the road. Now, if you're following somebody like slipstreaming, you could probably get to the 315 mark a lot easier, and I'm sure the Super Sport is probably ridiculous with slipstreaming somebody. But even like the Corvette Stingray, for example, can also hit, you know, 300 miles an hour depending on the road you are on using Nitro Chemist, so it really does depend. But the biggest advantage the Super Sport is going to have is the fact that, well, it can get there easier than the other vehicles, and well, I know a lot of people might argue this as well. The top speed of the vehicle might not be as broken because, you know, the longer races do affect that a lot. If you're doing one of these shorter races, you will most likely be going after better handling and or acceleration because, well, you're going to want that over top speed in some of these shorter races because going 300 plus miles an hour is probably not going to happen, and doing those shorter races you can actually use the other hypercars pretty easily. But the big thing is you can also lower the gearbox, as I mentioned before, with the Super Sport, and do make the acceleration a little bit better. So this car is going to be like the jack of all trades in this class, and my goodness, I love how this car looks. But again, guys, I want to know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Do you think the Super Sport is going to mess up the hypercar class? I really do want to know because I really, unfortunately, feel like this car might really mess things up a little bit. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is going to be the summits as well. We all know if it's a no-restriction hypercar race, everybody's probably going to start using the Super Sport 300 Plus. Now, does that mean everyone's pretty much going to have to use that vehicle to get the best time? I would say no on that, but with the vehicle being this fast and, you know, having a good build on it, it's going to be probably pretty hard to beat it because of the speed it does have. I do think this could be a bit of an issue in future summits and all that, but we will have to wait and see when a no-restriction summit comes alive where you can actually use this vehicle a lot. I'd really love to see how the leaderboards might look if you're basically seeing like the top 1,000 or so players on every single race using this car. I do think that's going to be a bit of a problem, but we'll have to wait and see on that because we really do not know. Because I would say this car is not going to make all the other hypercars useless, but more of the fact, seeing a reason to really run any of the other hypercars, and you have something like the Super Sport 300 that can basically accelerate and handle really well. Plus, if you really wanted to, you can jump into one of the longer hyper races and still get a crazy fast time on it. Now, I did notice on some of the events, guys, I still couldn't beat some of my other times with this vehicle on some of the hypercar events because, well, even though this thing's insanely fast, some of the other cars might be better in other aspects like their handling. I do know some of the hypercars are really good, like the Corvette ZR1 is one of my favorite. I love driving that thing. I actually drive the long range edition, which was in the Summit. That's probably my favorite hypercar in the game, but I never run it on Summits because I don't really find that to be fair. But that car handles really well, and I still couldn't beat one of my hypercar times with the Super Sport. So I do still think it's going to come down to the driver a bit, but having a car this fast is going to make a big difference with that. But I'm really interested to see how this is going to affect the game, like PvP, Summits, and all that. I wonder if Ubisoft might do something to this car later on, like in some way nerfing it. I'd rather not them like destroy and make the car almost useless to not use. I would rather have this car to be really good and or the top vehicle still, but maybe finding a way not to have it being as fast or something like that. I really don't know. I'd rather not see this car do like 310. That would be kind of unfortunate because, you know, this thing does hit 300 plus miles an hour. I think a lot of players would be upset, including myself, seeing this car getting nerfed super hard. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Have you been loving the Super Sport? I would say the Elite Bundle number 11, this is probably the best car in that. I would also say the Nismo is going to be worth a look if you guys have not driven that car yet. The new Nismo, the 2020 version, is a really good street car. Might even be one of the best now. I definitely recommend trying that out. Then obviously the Celine's probably going to fall into the trash can where it honestly belongs because, well, that thing is awful. But again, let me know what you guys think about the Super Sport in the comments below. And I've really been loving this car, using this thing on all the hyper races. This car is a lot of fun to use, and I've been finding myself having a blast driving the new Super Sport and basically all the hyper races. So I would say Ubisoft probably won't nerf it like that. But there are some things they probably could do to it in like Summits and all that, which is one thing I was wondering. Could they maybe like not allow this vehicle to be used in some of the races just to make it unfair? But then again, the car is available to everybody, so you could pretty much just farm money and buy this thing, then compete against other players using it. But if you have like a whole squad of players running this thing and slipstreaming each other, it's going to be really hard to beat their time because, well, they're going like 300 and something miles an hour the entire time. And if you're solo, you could probably do that, but it's going to be a little more difficult. And if you do not have the Nitro Chemist set, it's going to be very difficult to actually get a high time like that on some of the events. But we'll have to wait and see, as I mentioned before. But let me know again what you guys think about this car in the comments below. I'm personally loving it. I still cannot believe it was added into the Crew 2, and I cannot wait to see the other vehicles that come to the game. But again, let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Do you think something needs to be done to this vehicle, or do you think there could be some type of way to balance it out in the hypercar class? Because let's be honest, it will be hard to choose other vehicles over this one in most of the events now. But having a car this beautiful, it's going to be hard to pass up.